A
think you
Navy
can get
SEAL
away with this?
scarred by
These
war.
reports confirm
A detective
everything.
betrayed
You
by her
are
own
done.
badge.
I didn't
And
do
a loyal
this.
canine
I am being
who took a
framed,
bullet
and you know
meant
it.
for his partner. Together, they walked into the fire. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for the innocent lives hidden inside a single container. And for the truth no one else dared to face. This is the moment loyalty became a weapon, and justice finally struck back. If this story moves you, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps these powerful stories reach the people who need them most. A cold mist drifted over the Portland waterfront, clinging to steel beams and abandoned crates like a living breath of the sea. The night smelled of salt, engine oil, and the faint metallic whisper that always came before trouble. Evan Brooks walked along the pier with a long, grounded stride, the stride of a man who had spent too much of his life in deserts, jungles, compounds, and shadows the public never heard about. He was 32, tall, broad-shouldered, built from years of punishing SEAL conditioning. His dark hair was trimmed close, his jaw squared and slightly scarred from a grenade fragment he had taken during Operation Black Viper 4 years earlier. His skin was sun-toughened bronze, and his eyes, gray, sharp, always assessing, carried both exhaustion and vigilance. Even in a simple black jacket and plain Henley shirt, he moved with military efficiency. Chin slightly lifted, shoulders loose but ready, boots rolling heel to toe without a sound. He didn't know how to walk peacefully anymore. War had rewired him. The things he had seen had carved a quiet severity into him, the kind of silence that only came from violence endured and violence survived. At his side walked Shadow, his canine partner, a 5-year-old Belgian Malinois with a sleek black coat, powerful haunches, and amber eyes that never stopped scanning. Shadow was the kind of dog that moved like smoke and muscle fused together, each footstep measured, trained, lethal when commanded. His ears flicked at every distant clank of metal along the docks. He was a retired military working dog, but retirement meant little to an animal whose entire life had been built on alertness. For him, there was no off switch. Evan wished he could give him one. He'd promised Shadow a peaceful month. He'd promised himself the same. After 12 months deployed overseas, 12 months of watching men die and watching Shadow nearly die twice, Evan was desperate for something simple. Quiet mornings, long walks, maybe learning how to breathe again without expecting an explosion. But peace wasn't in the cards. Evan felt it first. A wrongness, a shift in the air of the docks. Shadow felt it even sooner. His ears snapped straight, muscles tightening beneath his fur. "Easy," Evan murmured, his voice low, calm, the way seals spoke when adrenaline circled their bloodstream, yet had not struck. Shadow didn't relax. He stared toward the loading bay near Warehouse 7. Evan followed the direction of that stare. A lone figure moved quickly beneath the buzzing yellow lights, a woman in dark tactical pants and a gray Portland police jacket. She wasn't just walking, she was hunting something, or running from something. Her ponytail, dark brown hair pulled tight, swung sharply with each step. She moved like someone trained, but there was an edge of fear woven into each stride. Evan slowed, his instincts sharpened into a blade. He had seen this body language 100 times on missions. Someone about to be ambushed, someone already aware that death was on their heels. "Stay close," Evan whispered. Shadow stayed, but tension vibrated off him. The woman drew closer to a row of stacked containers. She paused, scanned the shadows, then reached for her holster. That was when Evan saw the other shapes, 3 silhouettes peeling away from behind the containers, their movements synchronized, predatory, wrong. Civilians didn't move like that. Cops didn't move like that. These men were professionals, and they weren't there to arrest her. They were there to end her. The woman seemed to realize it a split second too late. One of the men raised a suppressed pistol. Evan didn't hesitate. "Shadow, move!" The dog bolted forward like a launched arrow. Evan sprinted after him. Time seemed to stretch like hot metal. The woman, Quinn Harper, he would later learn, turned just as the first man aimed. She fired a single shot, but her bullet ricocheted off a crate uselessly. The suppressor on the assassin's pistol hissed, and Shadow slammed into Quinn's legs, knocking her sideways behind a metal barrier. The bullet meant for her thudded into Shadow's flank in a sickening, heavy sound. Evan's heart hit his ribs like a hammer. "Shadow!" The dog yelped, short, sharp, but turned immediately, teeth bared, ready to fight until his last breath. Evan reached them in 2 more strides. He tackled Quinn fully behind cover as 2 more suppressed shots whispered through the air. "Stay down," Evan ordered, voice low but unarguable. She stared at him in shock, her eyes a striking forest green, wide with both pain and disbelief. Up close she looked younger than he expected, maybe early 30s, with a face marked not by softness but by resolve. Her jaw was sharp, her nose slightly crooked from an old break, and her expression, now twisted with fear, held the hard-earned grit of someone who'd spent years fighting an uphill battle. She wasn't just any officer. She was one who had already been betrayed by her department long before tonight. "Who the hell are you?" she breathed. "Someone who can help," Evan said, and then he moved. Evan stepped out from behind the barrier with the fluid deadliness of a trained killer. He closed distance fast, legs pumping, body dropping low as he swept behind a rusted forklift. One gunman advanced, but he never saw Evan coming. A hand struck his wrist, another hooked behind his elbow, and Evan twisted hard, dislocating the joint with a sharp pop. The gun fell. Evan caught it midair. One shot, clean, controlled, center mass. The man dropped. The second assassin fired, but Evan ducked behind a pillar and returned 2 shots, each precise, mechanical. Years of training, years of war, years of instinct sharpened to a razor point that now cut through the chaos with deadly efficiency. The docks echoed with muted impacts. Within 20 seconds, 2 men were down. The third ran, but Shadow, bleeding and limping, lunged forward and clamped onto his ankle, dragging him off balance with ferocious will. Evan closed in and ended the fight with a single blow to the throat. Silence filled the dock, except for the distant churn of waves and Quinn Harper's ragged breathing. Evan turned back. Quinn knelt beside Shadow, her hands trembling as blood darkened the dog's fur. "Oh, God, he saved me?" Her voice cracked. Evan dropped to his knees beside his partner. "You're okay. You're okay, buddy," he whispered, pressing a hand to Shadow's neck, feeling the rapid puff of breath warm his palm. Shadow licked his wrist once, as if saying he was ready to continue fighting, even though he was hurting badly. Evan pressed his forehead against Shadow's for one brief moment, grounding himself, forcing the flood of panic away. He couldn't lose him. Not after everything. "He needs a vet, now," Quinn said, frantic. Evan nodded. "Tell me what happened. Who were those men?" Quinn looked at the 3 bodies on the dock, swallowed hard, then looked back at Evan with eyes filled with the haunted knowledge of someone who'd uncovered something monstrous. "I wasn't supposed to see the container," she whispered. "The one they're moving tonight." "Container?" Evan asked, voice low. "Human trafficking," she said, "and someone high up in the city wants me dead for finding it." Evan felt cold steel settle inside him, the same coldness he felt before every mission, before every necessary kill. He looked out over the dark waters of Portland Harbor, the mist curling like fingers around the crates and machinery. He had hoped for peace, just one quiet month. Instead, he had walked straight into a war he didn't yet understand. But Shadow had bled for this woman, and Evan Brooks didn't let anyone hurt the ones he protected. "We need to go," he said, lifting Shadow carefully into his arms. Quinn stood, wincing at a bruise forming on her ribs. "You're helping me?" "You're alive because of my partner," Evan said, his voice low, steady, final. "So now we finish what he started." They disappeared into the darkness, 3 wounded souls bound by danger none of them had asked for, and a truth that powerful men would kill to bury. Cold rain began to fall as Evan Brooks carried Shadow across the dimly lit street, Quinn Harper limping behind him, one hand pressed tightly to her ribs. The downpour came sudden and heavy, the kind of Portland rain that blurred streetlights into smears of amber and turned the world into a muted watercolor. Evan's boots splashed through puddles as he moved with the calm urgency of someone who had walked wounded comrades through gunfire before. He kept his jaw locked, his breath steady, but inside, fear twisted with every labored exhale Shadow gave against his chest. Shadow's fur was warm and slick with blood, the black coat matted where the bullet had torn into the flank. Evan tightened his grip. He felt the dog's rapid heartbeat against his own. "Stay with me," he whispered, barely audible over the rain. "You fight through everything else. Fight this too." His voice was softer than Quinn expected from a man who moved like a weapon. She watched him from behind, his broad back, squared shoulders, and the powerful arms that held Shadow like he weighed nothing. Evan was a soldier down to the bone, but he carried Shadow with a gentleness that didn't fit his scarred exterior. That softness unnerved her. It meant this man could break if the dog died. Quinn's breath hitched from pain, but fear, raw and consuming, kept her running. She had never expected to survive the ambush. She had never expected a stranger to save her. She had certainly never expected this stranger to be a Navy SEAL with a dog willing to take a bullet for someone he didn't even know. "There," she said, pointing with a shaking hand. A small veterinary clinic stood at the corner of the block, its neon, "Open 24 hours" sign flickering. The windows glowed faint yellow, and beneath the awning, a half-asleep cat statue sat next to a pot of soggy chrysanthemums. The sign above the door read, "Riverside Emergency Animal Care." Evan pushed through the door with his shoulder. Warmth and antiseptic air enveloped them immediately. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A woman at the front desk jerked upright in her chair, startled. She was in her 50s, thin, with wispy silver hair pulled into a bun that barely held its shape. Her skin was pale, eyes sunken but alert, the look of someone who'd spent decades working nights. Her name tag read Janine. "Oh my God, what happened?" she gasped, standing so quickly her swivel chair rolled backward. Her gaze flicked from the bleeding dog to Evan's soaked clothing and Quinn's bruised face. "Is this a police canine?" "Yes," Quinn said, struggling to catch her breath. "He was shot during an operation. He needs help now." Janine rushed around the counter. "Bring him into the surgical room. Dr. Marlowe is in tonight. She'll know what to do." Evan followed silently, jaw set tight. He laid Shadow gently on a steel table in the center of the small surgery room. The dog whimpered, but his eyes remained open, tracking Evan. Evan stroked the side of his neck, and Shadow pressed his head weakly against the touch. A door swung open, and a woman strode in with quick, authoritative steps. Dr. Evelyn Marlowe was tall, maybe late 30s, with copper hair tied in a tight ponytail. Her face was sharp, her cheekbones pronounced, her eyes a deep hazel that revealed no fear, only focus. She wore navy scrubs beneath a long white coat, and her movements were confident, practiced, steady. She radiated the aura of someone who had chosen a life of chaos willingly and had mastered it. "What have we got?" she asked briskly, snapping on gloves. Her voice was low, textured, confident. "Entry wound left flank, moderate bleeding, breathing shallow but present." She touched Shadow's ribs and frowned. "He's in shock. Tell me what happened." "He took a bullet for someone," Evan said simply. His voice sounded calmer than he felt. 9mm, clean entry but maybe lodged. He's strong, but he's losing blood." "I'll decide how strong he is," Dr. Marlowe said, but not unkindly. She met Evan's eyes for a moment, took in his drenched clothes, his rigid posture, the carved lines of exhaustion on his face, and she nodded as if she understood more about him than she should. "Janine, get 2 units of canine O negative and prep for exploratory." Janine hurried out. Dr. Marlowe began working, her hands fast and precise. Shadow's breathing hitched as she pressed the wound. Evan's fingers curled into fists. Every instinct told him to intervene, to protect, to do something. But he knew better. He stepped back only half a pace. Quinn leaned against the counter beside him, her face pale but determined. Evan glanced at her for the first time since they entered. Rain streaked her cheeks, mixing with smeared dirt and the faint trace of dried blood. Despite the chaos of the night, she stood straight, shoulders squared, eyes clear with stubborn fire. "You hurt?" he asked. "I'll live," she said, though the tightness in her voice suggested otherwise. "You should get checked." "I'll get checked after the dog who saved my life gets saved." She hesitated. "Thank you for what you did." Evan said nothing. Words didn't come naturally to him anymore. Only action felt real. He nodded once, short and controlled. Minutes passed. Dr. Marlowe worked in silence. Quinn sank slowly into a chair, wincing as she pressed a hand to her side. Evan didn't sit. Soldiers didn't sit when danger still lingered in the air. Finally, the door opened, and Janine returned with 2 blood bags. Behind her walked a young man in light blue scrubs, tall, skinny, with a mop of sandy blonde hair. His face was narrow, youthful, with freckles across his nose. He looked barely 20. His name tag read Trevor. Trevor's eyes widened as he approached the table. "Oh, wow. Is he police grade? I've only seen pictures of dogs like this. He looks like he could tear down a door." "Trevor," Dr. Marlowe snapped. "Focus." "Right, sorry." He moved to assist, fumbling slightly with the IV line. Evan watched every movement, muscles tight. Trevor seemed harmless, nervous, inexperienced, too soft for violence. The kind of person who apologized for existing. But Dr. Marlowe, she was different. Hardened, efficient. A woman with secrets in her eyes. After several tense minutes, Dr. Marlowe straightened. "The bullet didn't shatter," she said, wiping her hands. "It lodged near the rib, missed the lung by luck. He's stable for now, but he'll need monitoring for internal swelling, pain meds, antibiotics, and rest." Evan exhaled slowly, letting the knot in his chest loosen by a fraction. Shadow's eyes fluttered as sedation pulled him under. Dr. Marlowe stepped toward Evan, meeting his gaze directly. "He's a fighter," she said. "Most dogs would have gone into cardiac arrest by now. Whatever his training is, it's one hell of a program." Evan nodded. "He's my partner." She studied him a moment longer. "And you're military." It wasn't a question. "Former." "No one is former," she said. "Not when you stand like that." Quinn sat up straighter. "Can we stay here for a bit, until the storm passes?" Dr. Marlowe hesitated. It was the first time she had hesitated since walking in. "This clinic is monitored," she said slowly. "The city's database checks police canine incidents. If someone's targeting you, they might check veterinary logs." Evan's jaw clenched. "Can you disable it?" "No, if I do, it pings the system." Evan cursed under his breath. He looked at Quinn. "We can't stay." Quinn opened her mouth to argue, but the front bell chimed. Janine turned. "We're closed to walk-ins after—" A man stepped into the lobby. His appearance was unremarkable except for how forgettable he seemed. Mid-40s, average build, average height, wearing a brown courier jacket with the logo of a delivery company. His face was lined, clean-shaven, his eyes flat and emotionless. His hair was graying, cut short. He could have been anyone. He could have been no one. Yet something about him sent warning bells screaming inside Evan's skull. Trevor peeked into the hall. "Oh, that's probably the late courier. They drop off meds sometimes." But Evan stepped forward, blocking the surgery room doorway with his body. Shadow slept behind him. Quinn stood slowly, her hand inching toward the small backup weapon she kept holstered at her ankle. The courier spoke calmly. "Delivery for Dr. Marlowe." His voice was too smooth, too practiced. His smile held no warmth. Dr. Marlowe frowned. "I didn't put in any late orders." The courier reached into his jacket. Evan moved instantly. "Get down," he barked. The courier's hand emerged, not with a gun, but with a small rectangular scanner. But the threat wasn't the object. The threat was the way he held himself. Too balanced, too steady, too ready. "Sir," Janine said nervously, "we didn't order anything." The man's eyes flicked past Evan, toward the surgery room, toward the bleeding dog, toward Quinn. And a spark of recognition flashed in his expression. "Found you," he whispered. Evan lunged. The courier whipped a pistol from inside his jacket. Evan slammed into him before he could aim. The gun clattered across the tile. The two men crashed into the reception desk, knocking over clipboards, pens, and a jar of milk-bone treats. Trevor yelped and dove behind a cabinet. Dr. Marlowe grabbed Janine and dragged her into the surgery room. Quinn drew her backup weapon and aimed. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. Evan struck the courier across the face. The man recovered shockingly fast, kneeing Evan in the ribs and grabbing his shirt collar. Evan twisted, throwing him off, and punched him hard in the jaw. The courier collapsed to the floor, but his hand darted into his jacket again. Evan kicked the arm, sending whatever device he held skidding under a counter. Quinn stepped forward. "Don't move." But the courier only smiled through bloody teeth. "It doesn't matter," he rasped. "We already tagged him." Evan froze. "Tagged who?" The man's smile widened. The dog? Shadow. Evan's world narrowed to one sharp, murderous point. The courier moved suddenly, drawing a blade from his boot, but Quinn fired. One clean shot to the shoulder. The man dropped the knife and collapsed, groaning. Evan grabbed him by the collar. "What did you put on him? What did you do?" His voice was a low, lethal growl. The courier spat blood. Too late. Evan slammed his head back against the tile. The man went still. Quinn rushed to the surgery room, panic rising. Dr. Marlowe stepped back as Evan tore through Shadow's bandages. And there, hidden beneath the gauze, was a tiny metallic disc the size of a shirt button. Burnished black. Sleek. Deadly. The tracker, a professional grade one. Quinn felt nausea twist through her. Someone, Someone knew we'd bring him to a clinic. They knew you'd survive, Evan said quietly, fiercely. They planned for it. He stared at the disc, and his expression hardened into something cold, something dangerous. We're leaving, now. But Shadow, Quinn started. Evan lifted the dog in his arms again. Shadow whined softly but didn't resist. He'll survive, Evan said, but staying here will get everyone killed. Dr. Marlowe stepped forward. Take the service exit. It leads to the back alley. I'll stall anyone who comes and delete your security footage. Quinn blinked. Why help us? Dr. Marlowe held her gaze, her expression unexpectedly soft. Because that dog fought to live, and because I've seen enough corruption in this city to know when someone is on the right side. Evan nodded once. Thank you. Quinn gave her a grateful, shaken smile. Thank you, Doctor. They slipped out the back door into the rain, shadows swallowing them as they disappeared into the night. 3 fugitives now bound together by blood, danger, and a truth too dangerous to ignore. And behind them, the clinic lights flickered as Dr. Marlowe whispered to herself, God help you all. The forest swallowed the night. Tall Oregon pines stood like dark sentinels beneath a sky bruised by storm clouds, their branches heavy with beads of rain that shimmered faintly in the thin silver of the moon. Evan Brooks drove the truck deeper into the winding mountain road, the tires grinding over wet gravel. The engine hummed low, steady, and each vibration from the chassis made Shadow stir weakly in the back seat. Evan checked the mirror again, eyes narrowing at the dog's shallow movements. The sedative from the clinic had begun to fade, but the gunshot wounds still throbbed beneath the fresh bandages. Shadow's amber eyes cracked open for brief seconds at a time, trying to track the road he couldn't stand to guard. Evan gripped the wheel harder. His hands, calloused from years of handling rifles, ropes, and survival blades, looked too rough to hold anything fragile. The world might have forgotten how to treat men like him, machines built for war, then discarded, but Shadow had never treated him like a weapon. Shadow saw him as something human, and he refused to lose that one creature that still did. Beside him, Quinn Harper leaned forward in her seat, her posture tense but her breathing steadier than earlier. The glow of the dashboard lights traced the sharp angles of her cheekbones, the faint bruising at her jaw, and the stubborn focus in her green eyes. She looked exhausted, shaken, but there was a new steadiness to her, almost as if the clarity of danger gave her something solid to hold on to. How much farther? She asked quietly. 10 minutes, Evan said. You keep a cabin out here? She asked, glancing at him. Not mine, Evan answered. Belonged to my instructor back in the early SEAL days. Old survivalist. He used it for training bonds and long-range recon breaks. Passed away 5 years ago. Left a few of us a key. Quinn absorbed that without comment. It's safe? As safe as we'll get. Silence settled again. Evan's jaw tightened. His reflection in the window stared back. Square jaw shadowed with stubble, a thin scar arching over his right eyebrow. Eyes haunted by too many years of watching death crawl toward him in desert heat or jungle rot. Quinn studied him for a moment longer, noticing the tension in his neck, the way his shoulders rose half an inch higher whenever Shadow whimpered. She saw discipline carved into his bones and battle fatigue etched into his silence. Knowing that someone like him had come to her aid meant more than she could say, but also terrified her. Men with his past didn't walk toward danger unless they had nothing left to lose. The truck crested a final hill, and the cabin appeared, small, squat, and made of weather-worn cedar. It sat near a ridge facing a valley full of thick pines. The only light was the moon drifting across its single front window. The roof sagged slightly at the corners, and the steps leading to the porch were crooked from frost damage. Evan parked behind the cabin, hidden from the main road. "Yet stay in the truck until I clear it," he said. Quinn nodded. Evan retrieved a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped outside. Cold mountain air hit him immediately, sharper than the city's rain-soaked wind. He moved with soundless precision, scanning corners, windows, tracks in the mud. Years of reconnaissance missions had trained him to read the environment like a language. Nothing stirred except the whisper of wind shaking pine needles loose. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood, dust, and faint traces of pine sap. Evans swept the rooms, kitchen, storage area, loft. Everything remained undisturbed, no footprints, no loose boards, no camera glints, no signs of intrusion except for a layer of neglect. He returned to the truck. "It's clear." Quinn immediately slid out of the seat and hurried to the back where Shadow lay curled. Evan lifted the dog again, carefully, slowly. Shadow let out a thin whine, pressing his muzzle into Evan's shoulder. Evan whispered against him, "I've got you. Just hold on." Quinn opened the cabin door, letting Evan enter first. He laid Shadow gently onto a thick wool blanket near the stone fireplace. Quinn crouched beside them, adjusting the blanket, checking the bandage with trembling hands. Evan stood, moving to grab wood from the corner stack. He crouched to build a small fire. When he struck the match, warm orange light spilled across the cabin, pushing back the cold. Quinn watched him through the flicker of flames. His movements were careful, controlled, the kind of care that only came from losing too much. Once the fire crackled to life, Evan finally exhaled. He sat back on his heels, studying Shadow's breathing. Quinn leaned against a nearby chair, rubbing her arms to warm them. "If they tracked us to the clinic," she began. "They won't track us here," Evan said. "Not unless someone physically followed the truck." "Did they?" "No." His voice left no room for doubt. "I checked." "But they tagged him," Quinn whispered, her throat tight. "They planned for us to take him somewhere. They planned to follow." Evan's expression hardened, shadowed by the firelight. "They won't get another chance." Quinn studied him quietly. She had been a cop for nearly a decade, trained by some of the toughest officers in Portland. But Evan's calmness under fire, his ability to read danger before it showed its teeth, that was something else. Something forged by years of survival, not training manuals. And she needed that now. A noise outside, a distant crunch of pine needles, made both of them tense instantly. Evan stood, silent as a blade. Shadow's ears twitched, though the dog didn't have the strength to rise. But it wasn't danger, just wind. Quinn exhaled shakily. "You should rest," Evan said, without looking at her. "I can't," Quinn murmured. "Not when I know they're still hunting me." "Sleep on the loft bed," he insisted. "Your ribs won't heal if you keep pushing them. I'll watch." "You haven't slept either," she said. "I don't need to." She stared at him. "Nobody doesn't need to." Evan didn't react. He simply walked to the cabin window, peering out into the trees. Minutes stretched, the room settled into quiet, the good kind, the cautious kind. The fire's warmth pulled fatigue from Quinn's bones. She sank onto the rug near Shadow. Then Evan's phone vibrated, barely perceptible, a silent buzz. He snatched it off the table. A coded message flashed across a secure app he hadn't used in years. Military-grade encryption, an intercepted transmission. Evan's gaze sharpened. "What is it?" Quinn asked, standing slowly. Evan didn't look up. He read the intercepted audio file once, expression darkening. "It's them," he said slowly. "Voss's men." The name hit Quinn like a punch. Her throat tightened. "What did they say?" Evan played the file aloud. The voices were muffled, distorted by low-frequency encryption, but the words were unmistakable. Two men, one with a gravelly accent, one with a clipped tone. She accessed the container logs. She wasn't supposed to see that manifest. Orders came from Voss himself. Eliminate her before she talks. Quinn's knees weakened. The firelight cast uneasy shadows across her face. Evan watched her without blinking, absorbing every subtle shift in her expression. The fear she tried to bury, the anger rising beneath it, the disbelief at hearing her death sentence spoken aloud. She swallowed. "I knew it. I knew the warehouse wasn't just a storage facility. I knew something was off. But I didn't know. He would send killers." Evan's voice was steady. "Tell me exactly what you saw." Quinn stared at the fire, as if gathering courage from its glow. "It was about a week ago," she began, voice hushed. "I was at the port assisting with a routine theft report. Nothing unusual, but during the shuffle, a shipping manifest wasn't logged properly. A container, 40's A-8C, was marked as textiles, but its weight listed was off by several tons." Her hands tightened into fists. "So I dug, looked up its prior route. There were inconsistencies, missing checkpoints. I asked for clarification, but my supervisor brushed it off, told me it was nothing." She lifted her gaze to Evan. Something dark flickered behind her eyes. "I didn't stop. I went back at night, checked the container myself." Evan waited. Inside, Quinn's voice grew quieter, edged with trauma. There was noise inside, light tapping. Then someone whispered for help. Evan's blood went cold. "I forced it open," Quinn continued, her voice shaking. "And I found them. 6 people. Women, girls, huddled behind crates, terrified, malnourished, some barely conscious. Evan's jaw tightened, rage flickering behind his eyes. Before I could get them out, Quinn whispered, a group of men arrived, armed, professional. They said I shouldn't be there. One of them mentioned a name, Voss, like he was a god they served. Quinn inhaled sharply. I got away, but I couldn't save the victims. The men loaded them onto a truck and drove off. Evan breathed slowly through his nose, fighting the urge to punch the cabin wall. He'd seen trafficking rings overseas. He knew the signs, the cruelty, the despair, but hearing it here, at home, burned deeper. Quinn stared at Shadow. That dog, your dog, saved me, twice now. If not for him, I'd be dead before sunrise. You're not dead, Evan said, and you won't be. Silence settled again. Outside, the wind howled through the pines. Hours passed, the fire dimmed. Quinn drifted into uneasy sleep on the loft bed, despite her earlier resistance. Evan sat by the window, Shadow lying weak but alert at his feet. The dog's breathing grew more stable, but pain flickered in his eyes each time he shifted. Evan stroked his head gently. You stay with me. You don't get to quit now. Shadow's tail thumped weakly. But something changed. Shadow's ears perked, nose lifting. His posture stiffened, pain forgotten. Evan straightened. He'd learned to trust Shadow's senses more than any piece of military hardware. The dog let out a low, warning growl. Evan reached for his pistol. Quinn jolted awake. What? Someone's outside, Evan said softly. A crunch of twigs, a shift of bark. Evan moved silently to the door. Quinn crept down the ladder, weapon drawn. Evan pressed a finger to his lips. Quinn stopped breathing altogether. Shadow's growl deepened, low and rumbling. The doorknob rattled, but then silence. Evan waited, counted 10 seconds, 20, 30. He flung the door open and aimed. Nothing, just cold wind sliding through the trees. He stepped outside, scanning. Tracks, fresh, deep enough to be recent, but only one pair. Not boots, not combat soles. Bare feet, small, light. Quinn joined him, staring at the prints. What the hell? Someone's scouting, Evan muttered. Not an adult, too small. A child? Quinn whispered. But before Evan could answer, Shadow barked sharply. A single bark, the kind he only made when danger was near. Evan spun. A shape darted between the pines. Thin, fast, wearing what looked like a torn white shirt. Quinn gasped. Oh God, she breathed. One of the victims. One of the girls I saw. Evan didn't hesitate. Grab your gear. We're not alone out here. In the darkness, the forest seemed to close in, no longer a place of refuge, but a trap tightening around them. The hunt, for truth, for survival, for the missing, had only just begun. A cold wind whipped across the abandoned railway bridge above the Columbia River as the night grew deeper, the sky black and heavy like a sealed vault. From the rusted beams overhead, rain dripped steadily, each drop echoing on the metal flooring beneath Evan Brooks' boots. He stood in silence, Shadow resting against his leg. Quinn Harper beside him, studying the faint lights of the distant port. Hours had passed since they fled the veterinary clinic. Hours of running, hiding, and narrowly avoiding patrol cars crawling through Portland in search of Quinn, the rogue officer falsely accused of sabotaging her own precinct. Warnings echoed through every radio band, every scanner. Officer Quinn Harper, armed and dangerous. The city had turned into a hunting ground, and for the first time in years, Evan felt something raw pressing beneath his sternum. Anger. Not the hot, reckless kind, but a cold, calculated fury sharpened by discipline and loss. Shadow's injury, Quinn's betrayal by her own department, the mercenaries hunting them. None of this was random. It was orchestrated, precise, methodical. Evan had seen operations like this in war zones. He had dismantled dozens. He could dismantle this one too. Quinn leaned against the metal railing, her dark hair damp from the mist, her bruised ribs wrapped tightly beneath her jacket. She looked exhausted but strong, the type of strength that came from refusing to break even when the world pressed down with full weight. Evan quietly admired that. Most civilians folded under 1/10 of what she'd endured, but Quinn Harper was something else. Sharp-minded, stubborn, moral to a fault, and now hunted because of it. Shadow lifted his head, one ear twitching. Evan knelt beside him, checking the taped gauze covering the wound Dr. Marlowe had stitched earlier. "Still with me, buddy," Evan murmured. Shadow thumped his tail weakly and nudged his nose against Evan's knuckles. The dog was hurting, but alive, determined, and watching the darkness with unwavering loyalty. Quinn turned to Evan. "We can't run forever." He remained silent. "We can't hide either," she pressed. "The city is on full alert. Every officer is looking for me. Voss knows we escaped the clinic. He'll send more people." Her gaze hardened. "We need to hit back." Evan's jaw tightened. "We will." "How?" Evan looked toward the faint rows of cranes silhouetted at the port. "By being smarter than them." Quinn exhaled. "Then tell me your plan." Evan stood, rain beating on his jacket. "We stop reacting, we choose the battleground." He looked at her fully. "We go after Voss." Quinn stiffened. "Captain Alden Voss. He's high-ranking, powerful, connected. He's got officers who worship him. If he's running a trafficking ring, the cover-up is deeper than we know. That's why we need proof." "And where exactly do we get proof?" Evan's eyes darkened with purpose. "We create it." 2 hours later, they were in an abandoned auto shop tucked behind an underpass near the river. Iron shelves sagged under old oil cans and dusty boxes, and the cracked concrete floor glistened with puddles from the roof leaks. Evan stood before a workbench lit by a single battery lantern, assembling what looked like a standard external hard drive, but its contents were anything but standard. He worked with smooth precision, each movement measured, never wasted, the ingrained muscle memory of an operator used to building improvised systems behind enemy lines. His fingers moved over the circuit board with steady focus, soldering, adjusting micro jumpers, loading encrypted decoy files. His discipline showed even in the smallest gestures, shoulders straight, breathing calm, expression stone hard. Quinn paced behind him, arms crossed over her chest, wincing each time her ribs pulled. "Are you sure someone like Voss will take the bait?" "Yes," Evan said without looking up. "Men like him always want to control the narrative. And this?" She nodded at the hard drive. "Will look like something he has to seize." Evan inserted a chip with a soft click. "It'll look like internal documentation. Names, transfers, coded logs. Everything his operation would want to erase." "And the encryption?" "High level. He'll think it's real the moment he sees it." Evan paused, meeting her gaze. "He can't ignore something this dangerous." Quinn studied him for a long moment. "You've done this before." Evan didn't answer. But she wasn't wrong. During an operation years ago, Operation Black Viper, the enemy had falsified intel to lure his unit into a kill zone. Only half survived. Since then, Evan had learned the value of turning an enemy's own tactics against them. After another 10 minutes, he held up the completed device. "It's ready." Quinn approached, her eyes fixed on the drive. "So what now?" "Now," Evan said, "we make sure Voss hears about it." The informant was a man named Rick Calder, a low-level officer with a reputation for cutting corners and cashing favors. Evan had found him through an encrypted police channel Quinn still had access to. Calder fit the psychological profile perfectly. Ambitious, morally flexible, frightened of authority, and desperately eager to impress higher ranks. He also had one defining trait Quinn had mentioned. Calder idolized Voss. The auto shop door cracked open, and the man stepped in nervously. Rick Calder was in his late 30s, with sandy hair slicked back with too much product, small, watery blue eyes, and a body soft from desk work rather than field assignments. His cheeks were puffy, his chin weak, and sweat already beaded along his upper lip. His uniform jacket hung sloppily, telling Quinn that he rarely bothered to check the fit. He moved with jittery energy, glancing around like someone who expected danger, but didn't know how to prepare for it. "Officer Harper?" Calder whispered, voice trembling. "Jesus, you're actually here. You're supposed to be. Everyone's looking for you." Quinn stepped forward, keeping her face hard. "And you came anyway." He swallowed. "Voss has everyone on high alert. He says you're dangerous, that you stole evidence, that you—" "He's lying," Quinn said bluntly. Calder pulled at the collar of his shirt. I don't know what to believe." "Believe this," she said, holding out the hard drive. Calder's eyes widened. "Is that—" "It's evidence," Quinn said. "Real evidence. The kind that proves everything Voss is covering up." She kept her voice raw, desperate, not because she was acting, but because desperation was real. "It has logs, transfers, shipment numbers. Voss will want this. And if you want a future in that department, you'll deliver it." Calder blinked rapidly. Evan watched from the shadows, measuring every twitch, every breath. Calder fit the mold perfectly. Quinn lifted the drive slightly. "Take it?" His hand shook as he reached for it. Evan stepped forward from behind a pillar, his presence filling the room like a thunderhead. Calder jolted, almost dropping the drive. "That's for Voss alone," Evan said, voice low. "No one else." Calder nodded frantically. Yes, I understand." He backed toward the exit, gripping the drive like it might explode, then disappeared into the rain-soaked night. Quinn turned to Evan. "You think he'll run straight to Voss?" "He won't be able to help himself," Evan replied. "Weak men are predictable. And when Voss goes after what he thinks is real evidence..." Evan met her gaze, gray eyes intense. "We'll be waiting." The port at night looked almost alien, cranes looming like iron skeletons against the storm clouds, container stacks arranged like labyrinths, the ground slick from hours of rain. Security lights cast harsh cones through the fog, and distant engines growled as cargo crews prepared for shipments. At the far end, a warehouse with peeling red paint stood alone, its interior lights glowing faintly. Quinn recognized it immediately. "That's where I saw the girls," she whispered. "Weeks ago, before everything started." Shadow stood beside her, his breathing shallow but determined, one paw slightly raised to ease pressure on the injured side. Yet his eyes were bright, focused, ready. Evan crouched behind a stack of shipping pallets, studying guard rotations. Two at the front, one on the roof, no one watching the back utilities, overconfident. "Because they think they control everything," Quinn said. "Good," Evan murmured. "We'll use it." The plan was simple. Evan would infiltrate the warehouse from the back, where a ventilation shaft hung loosely from recent repairs. Quinn and Shadow would circle around the electrical junction box, feeding this quadrant of the port. When Evan gave the signal, Quinn would trip the main circuit. The blackout would blind the guards, disorient them, and create just enough chaos for Evan to move inside undetected. They waited. Minutes passed, tension thick. A black SUV pulled up to the warehouse. A man stepped out, tall, broad, late 50s, silver hair slicked back, trimmed beard, crisp black coat, a face carved with rigid lines of authority and ambition, cold eyes with no empathy. Alden Voss. Quinn's breath hitched. "That's him!" Evan's expression didn't change, but a flicker of understanding passed through his eyes. The understanding that the man in front of him was not just corrupt, but dangerous. A predator in command of the entire city's machinery. Voss disappeared inside. Evan touched Quinn's shoulder. "Ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Shadow let out a soft growl. Evan moved first, slipping through shadows like a blade through water. Quinn headed toward the junction box, Shadow limping at her side. The metal casing crackled faintly with static as she pried it open. Inside, wires coiled like snakes. She waited. A faint vibration pinged through her earpiece. Evan's signal. Quinn exhaled and crossed the wires. The port plunged into darkness. Shouts erupted. Flashlights flickered wildly. Guards cursed, scrambling. Engines stalled. Security cameras died with a soft pop. Quinn ducked behind a cargo lift. "Shadow, stay close." Inside the warehouse, Evan moved quickly along the upper rafters. Below him, Voss was barking orders into a radio. "Get generators online. Secure the main shipment. I want full sweep." One guard heard movement and turned, raising a rifle. Evan dropped behind him and incapacitated him with a chokehold before he could even speak. Two more guards moved toward the entrance, confused. Evan disabled both with swift, brutal efficiency. As he reached the central aisle, a sudden shout erupted. "Harper!" a guard roared, spotting Quinn outside. A spotlight snapped on as backup generators flickered to life. The guard aimed. Shadow moved first. The injured Malinois surged forward with a growl that tore from deep in his ribs. He slammed into the guard's legs, knocking the rifle aside. The shot fired wide, sparking off metal inches from Quinn's head. The guard tried to shake the dog off, but Shadow clamped onto his forearm with desperate strength. "Shadow!" Quinn cried, half proud, half terrified. The dog held on. Inside, Voss spun toward Evan, recognizing the intruder in the dim apron of emergency lights. "You!" Voss snarled. "You're the one ruining my operation." Evan stepped forward, lit by the faint red glow of backup power. His face was carved into pure resolve, soldier's fury controlled behind years of discipline. "It ends tonight," Evan said quietly. Voss reached for a pistol holstered under his coat. Evan charged. The two men collided near a stack of wooden crates. Voss was strong for his age, fueled by panic and arrogance. But Evan fought with precision, his body moving like a weapon honed through thousands of hours of training. Voss swung wildly, but Evan ducked, struck his ribs, then drove a knee into his stomach. A lantern toppled, oil spilling, flame licking across the wooden floor. The warehouse began to burn. Voss lunged for a crowbar. Evan dodged, grabbed Voss's wrist, twisted hard, bone cracked. The older man screamed, dropping the weapon. Flames spread, igniting crates stamped with foreign shipping labels. The heat rose rapidly. Quinn rushed inside, Shadow limping behind her, blood spotting the concrete where he stepped. Voss staggered backward toward the main exit, but Evan cut him off, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against a steel support beam. "You trafficked people," Evan growled. "You tried to kill her. You tried to kill my dog." Voss gasped, fear finally breaking through arrogance. "You don't know what you're interfering with." Evan silenced him with one final sharp strike. Voss collapsed, unconscious. Outside, sirens wailed. Backup lights illuminated the burning warehouse, shadows flickering across the dock as Quinn ran toward Evan, Shadow limping behind her, smoke swirling around them. They had done it. Voss was finished, and the port, for the first time, felt less like a trap and more like the beginning of justice. Smoke still curled upward from the collapsing warehouse, drifting like ghostly ribbons into the bruised sky above the docks. The early light had not yet risen, but the horizon glowed faintly with a promise of morning. Sirens wailed in the distance, louder and closer with each passing second. Evan Brooks stood over the unconscious body of Alden Voss, chest heaving, hands shaking slightly. A rare tell of the adrenaline crash hitting him after the fight. The bruises forming across his ribs throbbed with each breath, but it didn't matter. Voss was down. Shadow limped toward Evan with Quinn beside him, her hand bracing the dog's side as smoke swirled around them. Shadow's eyes were alert but exhausted, each movement labored yet stubbornly brave. "Evan," Quinn called, coughing from the smoke. "We have to get out. The flames are reaching the fuel drums." Evan nodded, kneeling to check Shadow's wound one more time. The dog nudged his palm, as if to say he was fine, as if he always would be fine, as long as Evan was there. Evan's voice softened. "You did good, buddy. You did damn good." Before Quinn could respond, the roar of engines shook the ground. Black SUVs screeched to a halt beyond the shipping containers. Floodlights burst on, cutting through the darkness. Uniformed agents poured out, heavily armed, tactical gear, disciplined formation. FBI. The lead agent stepped forward, raising a megaphone. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, step away from the structure and show your hands. Now." Quinn stiffened. They think I'm the criminal." Evan looked at her, calm even in the chaos. Not for long. 3 agents approached, weapons drawn but not firing. Their movements were precise, barking orders with firm but controlled authority. The first agent, a tall black man in his 40s with a shaved head and a thick tactical jacket, stepped closer. His voice was deep, steady, clearly someone used to command. "Identify yourselves. Hands where I can see them." Quinn raised her hands slowly. "Detective Quinn Harper, Portland Police Bureau. Badge number 44126. I'm a fugitive," one of the younger agents hissed. He was lean, mid-20s, with sharp cheekbones, a thin nose, and dark eyes burning with suspicion. His name tag read, Agent L. Parks. He held his rifle tight, knuckles white. "Drop to your knees." "She's innocent," Evan said calmly, stepping forward. The older agent eyed him carefully. "And you are?" "Petty Officer First Class Evan Brooks," Evan said, standing tall despite the burns and bruises. Rain clung to his short black hair, his square jaw tense but composed. "United States Navy SEAL, off-duty but still active. I'm the one who took down Voss." The older agent blinked, recognition flickered. "Brooks. Evan Brooks." He lowered his gun slowly. "You're the one from Operation Black Viper. I read your file." Parks scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Harper sabotaged her own department, and this guy shows up out of nowhere." Before he could finish, Quinn stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Voss framed me. He ran a trafficking ring through this port. The evidence you've been missing, the girls, the containers, he hid everything under special clearances." Evan pointed at Voss's unconscious body. "You want proof?" he said. "Start with him." Agents rushed forward to cuff Voss. Others poured into the burning warehouse with thermal cameras, weaving through smoke. Within minutes, voices crackled through radios. "We found them. Multiple victims alive, malnourished but stable." Another radio voice. "We've got ledgers, shipping manifests, internal documentation. Everything Harper said is true." Agent Parks froze, his expression melting from suspicion to horror. The older agent exhaled heavily, his voice softening. "Detective Harper? Quinn? You were telling the truth all along." Quinn swallowed hard, her face a mix of exhaustion and vindication. "I tried to report it. They didn't want to hear it." The agent removed his helmet and stepped closer, his tone now gentle. "On behalf of the Bureau, I'm sorry." Quinn blinked fast, breath shaking. Not from fear this time, but from the emotional weight of being believed after so much betrayal. But the moment of relief was cut short when Shadow suddenly collapsed. "Shadow?" Evan dropped to his knees instantly. Quinn knelt beside him. The dog whined, eyes drifting shut. Blood seeped through the temporary bandage. The older agent raised a hand. "We have a medical team right behind us. Let's get him help." A woman sprinted toward them from the convoy, a field medic, Hispanic, early 30s, hair in a tight braid, name tag A. Salazar. Her face was strong and angular, with sharp brown eyes radiating fierce competence. She knelt, pulling out equipment with rapid efficiency. "What happened?" she said, already checking Shadow's vitals. "Gunshot wound, left flank," Evans said, voice hoarse. "He's been pushing himself, too much." Salazar frowned in concentration. "He's a fighter, but he needs real surgery, not field care. I'm calling for a canine evac." Evans stroked Shadow's head as the dog's breathing evened out under medication. "Hang on, buddy, just a little longer." Salazar gave Quinn a quick glance. "He'll make it." Quinn nodded weakly, relief softening her tense features. "Thank you." The next several hours blurred into sirens, headlights, agents shouting updates, and paramedics moving victims out of the dock. The warehouse fire was contained before it could spread. Voss was revived and arrested under heavy guard. Quinn gave testimony, clearing every detail of her investigation. Evan was questioned as well, long, exhaustive hours, but every answer only strengthened Quinn's case. When dawn finally approached, the FBI's mood had shifted entirely. They weren't treating Quinn and Evan like fugitives anymore. They were treating them like heroes. 3 days later, the sky above Portland was clear, a soft peach glow spilling across the early morning clouds. At the federal headquarters, Quinn adjusted her blazer with trembling fingers as she prepared to stand before the review board. The bruises on her ribs were fading, her eyes looked clearer. There was steel in her spine again. Evan stood behind her with Shadow, who now walked with a slight, permanent limp but held his head high. The Malinois had been through a full treatment at the Federal Canine Trauma Center. Stitches, antibiotics, rest. His coat shone again, though the scar would remain. Shadow didn't mind. He wore it proudly, a badge of honor. Inside the boardroom, the panel of internal affairs officers reviewed Quinn's cleared charges. Documents lay stacked on the long table. The lead officer, a stern older woman with short gray hair and sharp eyebrows, folded her hands. "Detective Harper," she said, voice cool but firm, "the Bureau extends its apology. You are hereby reinstated without prejudice." Quinn exhaled a long, trembling breath. "Thank you," she whispered. When she stepped outside the room, Evan stood waiting. She smiled, tears threatening. "They cleared me." Evan nodded. "You earned it." Quinn knelt, scratching Shadow's chin. "We earned it." Shadow wagged his tail. 1 week later, the ceremony wasn't large, but it felt significant. At the naval compound just outside Portland, rows of service members stood in crisp uniforms. Evan wore his own dress blues, pressed perfectly, decorated with ribbons earned through years of service. But he held himself humbly, as though none of it mattered anymore. A senior officer approached, a man in his 60s, tall, with deep-set eyes and a graying mustache. His name was Rear Admiral Douglas Hamer, a man known for strict discipline and quiet fairness. His weathered face and slightly stooped posture spoke of decades of service. "Petty Officer First Class Brooks," he said, voice deep and resonant. "You rendered aid while off duty, risked your life for civilian victims, and dismantled a criminal operation compromising national security. On behalf of the United States Navy, we award you the Distinguished Service Medal. The medal was pinned to Evan's chest. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened in a way Quinn had rarely seen. Shadow barked once, as if in applause. The Admiral looked down at the dog. "And this canine," he added, "has shown valor beyond standard service. He is hereby granted honorable discharge." Quinn blinked. "He's retired?" Evan nodded. "He deserves peace." Shadow pressed against their legs proudly. After the ceremony, they drove back into Portland. The morning fog lifted slowly as the city awakened below. By the time they reached Quinn's apartment, a small place overlooking the harbor, the sun had begun its rise. The balcony doors were open, letting in the smell of sea salt and fresh wind. Evan leaned on the railing, arms crossed, watching the water shimmer with early gold. Shadow lay beside him, head resting on his paws. Quinn stepped out, holding 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to Evan. "Feels unreal," she murmured. "After everything. To stand here and see the ocean again. To breathe without fear." Evan looked at her. "It's real. You sure?" Quinn asked softly, searching his face. "Because peace never lasted for me before. Maybe it will now." Quinn smiled faintly. "Maybe." Shadow nudged their legs, letting out a soft, content rumble. Evan reached down, stroking the dog's scarred side. "Family stays," he whispered. Quinn's breath caught. For the first time in a long time, Evan allowed himself to relax. His muscles loosened, his shoulders dropped slightly. He didn't feel the constant threat pressing at his back. He didn't feel alone. The sun crested over the horizon, casting warm amber light across the harbor. The water glowed like molten gold. The city, once a battlefield, now looked peaceful again. Quinn leaned her head on Evan's shoulder. Shadow rested between them. Together, they watched the sunrise. After the storm, dawn finally came. In the end, this story is not just about danger, sacrifice, or the darkness that people like Evan, Quinn, and Shadow fought through. It is about the quiet miracles that still exist in this world. The miracle of loyalty, the miracle of survival, the miracle of finding light after the darkest night. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or bright flashes. Sometimes they arrive in the shape of a wounded dog that refuses to give up, a friend who stands by your side, or a sunrise that reminds you that no storm lasts forever. And just like in their journey, every one of us faces battles the world may never see. We face fears, betrayals, heartbreak, and moments when we feel completely alone. But miracles still happen, often in the smallest moments, in the quiet strength we discover within ourselves, and in the people God places in our lives at the exact moment we need them. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of the courage, loyalty, and hope we all carry inside us, please take a moment to share this video with someone who needs encouragement today. And if you want more stories of faith, bravery, and unexpected miracles, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach the people who truly need them. May God bless you, protect your family, guide your steps, and remind you every day that no matter how deep the night is, His light will always rise again. If you believe in the power of faith and in the strength of loyalty, we'd be honored if you type Amen in the comments. Thank you for being here. May God watch over you always.